Tracy, thank you so much for being here and taking time to speak with me. It's great to see you. Great to catch up for a few minutes here. I'd love if you could, for everyone else, just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and then we'll go from there.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me, Patrick. It's really fun to represent and to be a part of this. So my name is Tracy Bullock. I have a business called Bullock Training and Development, and I use the Sandler curriculum. So Sandler training curriculum is the foundation of what I do. I chose the Sandler curriculum for really three reasons. After working corporate America for 30 years with P&G, I recognized that as I was moving into a market of small to medium-sized businesses and businesses that were in huge growth mode even, there weren't a lot of resources that were provided at that space. And frankly, my number one favorite thing to do is to help people develop their personal skills they can translate professionally. And Sandler's platform is based on the psychology of communication and reinforcement training, because we don't hear something once and remember it. So, and then the third reason was I love the collaboration, and I love the fact that it's a global company, but with a real local feel. And so all three of those factors really weighed into my choices.
Cool. And so you've been with Sandler now for how long? How long have you been running your own training?
Let's see, 13, so 8 years. Just had my 8-year anniversary August 1st.
Awesome. Congrats.
Thank you.
And then I know Sandler does more than just sales, but sales training and sales development. But what are most of your engagements? What are most people hiring you for? And kind of what are the outcomes that you're helping them achieve for their teams or their organizations?
That's a great question, because you're right. I personally focus my business in three areas. Sales, certainly. But when you get to management and leadership, which are two totally separate things, we really have some intriguing curriculum that, having taken everything under God's green earth from a P&G standpoint, that I was really, really impressed with. So probably the place I spend the majority of my time right now is in the bouncing back and forth between the management and the leadership pieces, especially coming out of 2020. We're finding a couple things happen, right? Either people came out of it and understand that what they were doing needs to change, which means they need to change their skill set from a management perspective. So it's that gap we're trying to fill. And typically it's around, how can I best manage people, especially in a blended environment? From a leadership perspective, it's understanding how to envision not just where you want to end the year, but how you want to take these new changes that we're seeing forward and develop a plan and get the right positions in place to deliver it. Then the skill set, the processes, even the metrics, right, become something that but you have to know where you're going first, or you'll get pretty much anywhere except for maybe where you want to be. Yeah. So I'd say that's probably a good 50-60% of my efforts right now. The other 40, of course, is sales, which I love because I've done it my whole life, but it's just been intriguing.
Yeah. And you mentioned, I think you said small, medium-sized businesses. I feel like we started saying that that's a lot of who you're working with. And so I imagine that part of the kind of the reason that people want to work with you and Sandler is because they don't have maybe the resources internally. Is that a big part of the reason, right? They want to develop their team or upgrade their system or their training, and they don't have it, or is it something else? That like what does that scenario look like where you come in? Are you augmenting existing programs, creating that new? Are you is it something where you become their training arm for their teams? Like how does the engagement look for most of your clients?
That is an intriguing question also, because it is either we need to upskill our teams. And in order to do that, somebody has to train the trainer, right? Everybody understands that even if you have internal trainers, even if you have a whole L&D or T&D, training and development, or learning and development, they're called different things at different companies. Even if you have that department, many times they can't specialize or don't specialize in particular things I've identified as outages. So it's a real nice fill in the gap and help everybody skill up, including the L&D department, right? So for our enterprise clients, I obviously from my background also have some pretty darn big clients, but I'd say the number one reason people are looking for help right now, and a lot of it is in the sales and sales management arena, is they understand that people are struggling to figure out. We went from a buy everything off the internet perspective to a virtual selling perspective to now some people back with either a combo or in person, face to face. We've all learned to behave differently. So how do you adjust your communication style to fit the needs of the people you're talking to? And I mean, that can go everywhere from leadership all the way down to sales too, internally. But really, it's the external focus on what do we need to know differently. So they're looking to people who, I'm not talking about the person who was dismissed or let go or displaced, who used to be a sales manager who now says I'm a sales trainer. I'm not talking about that person. I'm talking about somebody who does this for a living and is constantly refining their own and honing their own skills so they can turn and use them.
Yeah. And I find it interesting because I've of course interacted with a number of I don't want to call you guys all Sandlers because I know everyone's
we use the same curriculum.
Yeah. But I mean, I find it interesting that I think there's the professional development part and upskilling. And then I feel like there's also this need for management and accountability and bringing in someone from the outside to help drive that. And whether it be because it doesn't exist today or because it's not strong enough. Can you speak a little bit about how you work with clients to instill some of that accountability and management? Because I feel like that's an interesting thing about working with a Sandler that most people might not consider, but I know that that's an element of what you guys are supporting.
Yeah, that's going to show up in three ways. One is teaching people, first of all, that goals are set individually by individuals, and we want to, as quickly as possible and as strongly as possible, make the connection between the goals of the department and the company and the goals of the individual, because the closer they match, the more you're going to find a productive employee. The second piece of that would be accountability training. How do you hold people accountable? And frankly, is it the direct reports accountability, or is the fault lacking on the manager's part, who either doesn't know how to hold them accountable, is afraid to hold them accountable, or frankly has never been taught what that conversation looks like from start to finish?
Yeah.
I guess the last piece of that I think is probably one of the strongest in all of my years is the concept of a personal cookbook or a scorecard, whether you're in sales, whether you're in operations, whether you're in management or leadership, but understanding what behaviors drive the kind of results you're looking for. Because if all you measure is the results, those behaviors have already happened, right? And our KPIs, key performance indicators, are lagging indication of what success looks like. So having that accountability both to yourself and to your manager. I mean, I hold myself accountable for a cookbook every single week. On Sunday night, I put it together and I track it all week long. And Friday, before I get my first cocktail, I have to fill it out, right, to see where I was. And it's a direct correlation between doing the right behaviors and the results that come.
I was actually, that's kind of where I wanted to go with this is, I feel like there's the saying, the shoemaker's kids don't have shoes, or that, you sometimes you bring so much to the table from a skill set perspective. And I don't imagine that I'm not you particularly, but anybody is capable of being the greatest at every element of every tool in the toolkit you can't use all the time. But what are some of the things from your toolkit that, that you've learned or that you teach, but that you also practice daily yourself? So you mentioned, your kind of cookbook or checklist of things that you're trying to get done. And that's, I hear you on that. I'd be curious what some of those things might look like. But how is it that how do you break down your week? How do you stay productive? What are some of the tools that you really use, yourself, to keep yourself on task and to make sure that you're hitting the goals and the things that you need to?
And a great question for any solopreneur, any person working in a smaller company, right? So you mentioned my scorecard, my weekly scorecard, but I'm tracking I'm tracking several things, right? I'm tracking what my behaviors need to be. So for instance, I know I need to have 10 conversations with, I call them unique conversations, either with new people or with people that I'm currently working with, have the potential to work with to move business ahead. I know from that I need to have 5 appointments, and based on my closure rate, then I can pretty much guarantee, based on what they're worth, what I'm going to make for those appointments and when. But you have to continually fill the bucket because you have to continually set the appointments. So that's one piece. The second is I am a rabid lifelong learner. So I also hold myself accountable for at least 5 hours of learning every week. And my favorite thing to do is say, okay, just tried this, fell in love with it. Here's how it helped me. Let me train you, and then have you start applying it to see how you might be able to do it. And then I guess the last thing is I'm also a voracious reader. So anytime somebody recommends a book to me and tells what it's about, it goes on my, not anytime, but it goes on my list of, gosh, I could either learn from it or I could read it.
Yeah. I'm guilty of buying the books and then they just kind of pile up. And then I wait until I got a trip and I pull one off the shelf and hope that I get to it. And one thing you said that I really liked is, you talked about some of the things that you try to do around unique conversations and a certain number of unique conversations and a certain number of meetings. Someone once told me that in sales, we measure the wrong things oftentimes, which is like we measure the harvest, right? And which is like what you actually close, but that's not closing deals isn't gonna drive the next deal, right?
Oh, right.
Yeah. So you have
That's why the unique conversations and the appointments, because you go to networking events, you have conversations, you connect on Zoom for one thing and one thing only, and that's to get an appointment. Because if you don't get an appointment, how can you have a conversation about what they need instead of what you sell? Because nobody cares what you sell. They only care if what you sell helps them fill a need. Yeah.
That's a lesson. I feel like it takes people, you got to get about 10 years in your career to figure out that it's not about you. Which also kind of brings me to my next question around best and maybe even worst advice. I think sometimes I remember the bad advice as much as I remember the good advice that I've gotten through the years. What's been some of the best advice that you've had that stuck with you that still to this day, like you go back to, or that you give to other people, that's kind of a guiding principle? And then on the flip side, if you want to share some bad advice that you've gotten or that you've heard, or that comes around, I'd love to hear that. I think sometimes it's fun to know what the bad advice is, so people don't make those mistakes again.
Yeah. Hopefully they keep it straight too, right? So here's the good advice. The good advice, I'm going to give advice in 2 different areas. One is you cannot control what you don't measure. So if you are not figuring out what's going to drive your success, how can you tweak it? How can you control it? How can you understand what to do more of and what to do less of, right? From a professional standpoint. From a personal standpoint, the other good advice I got is what's right for you today, the goals, the motivations, the things you're working towards may change over time, and it's okay for you to change too, right? Because life happens. And don't ever be ashamed of saying, this is what I need for me. Yeah. And that has served me well my entire career. Yeah, both those things.
It's changing your mind is a strength sometimes, right? Acknowledging that you were, maybe not necessarily wrong, but that this wasn't the right best decision, or this wasn't the thing to do, or maybe I could do it this way or do it better. And I look for those opportunities sometimes when I can find my mistakes and then adjust course and be like, well, I learned, right? And then I think there's a lot of times that, again, it takes a while to learn that, and most people will push forward to the point of consequence.
Yeah, and I don't want to say stupidity, but stubbornness is probably the
Yeah,
right
a little
word.
bit of ego,
Yeah.
like that kind of subconscious ego where you almost are in a subconscious denial of the fact that there may be a better way, or that something's not quite as the way it should be. But the bad advice, does anything come to mind in terms of something you've heard or learned?
I think the worst advice I've ever gotten is, if you just do it this way, it'll work for you. And it's not that it's bad advice, because we don't need to reinvent the wheel, but everybody has to see what's right for them. And one person's trash is another person's treasure. I know somebody who says, hey, I'm working 4 days a week, that's it, and this is the only program I'm going to train on. And that person has made a fabulous, fabulous business out of those choices. But guess what? Those aren't my choices, nor are they my personal strengths. My personal strengths, because I love selling, has to be selling. But I spent 3/4, if not more, of my career, more than that, helping others develop and managing people. So my strength is in helping people learn, not just learn, but execute those skills. So I think it's this way is the right way is probably the worst advice I ever got.
Yeah, I think it also takes someone it takes some coaching, but processes and the way that something is done, a process is really just to get you from 0 to 1. And then to get from 1 to 2, it's got to be the reality of the situation, right? The process got you in the game, but now, is that what really works in practice, and does it need to change? And is reality telling you something else? And while we're on the topic of advice, because I have a Sandler on the line, I've got a sales expert, best sales advice. What comes to mind is like the game-changing sales advice that either for you made the turning point in your sales career, or for others that you see has some of the biggest impact? And I know Sandler's got so much, so there's so many great things you could probably share, but what comes to mind?
Pick one, if just one.
Well, we can go with 2. but
I'll go with 1 to start, and then I'll tell you my second favorite. But if you don't take the time to build trust, why would anybody answer any personal questions or professional questions with somebody they don't trust? And I'm not talking about, so I call it going from polite to personal and personal to trust. So many people stop at polite and maybe a little personal, but until we can earn the trust, and there are a lot of different ways Sandler teaches to do that, and make it about the person you're talking to, not about you. I don't know why anybody would answer questions, right? My second favorite piece of advice is they buy me first. Am I credible? Do they trust me? Do they understand that I'm even interested in them? They buy what they need, and do I even have anything that can answer their issues? Second, and they buy what I do third. And keeping those 3 things in mind, earn the trust, figure out what they need, and if you can even supply it, and then tell them only as much as they need to know about what you do that answers their need. You're not vomiting information all over your favorite prospects or clients.
Yeah. I love that, from polite to personal and from personal to trust. That's a great framework, way to think about that. And I see that. I see, some people skip even the polite part.
They just go right to, let's get to it. It's like,
right. Yeah. And that, that kills the relationship before it can even start. People appreciate courtesy and manners, that's a great framework, great tip. What does the rest of 2021 look like for Tracy Bullock? How are you growing? Where are you focused? what's on deck for the rest of this year, beginning of the next?
So on deck with the ongoing management stuff we talked about, right? So that's going to take me all the way through probably mid 2022 with what's on the books right now. But some big teams are coming, recognizing, and it'll be sales focused, recognizing that a couple of great people are carrying the day. And if that movable middle, the people who have the opportunity to be just a little bit better, if they got a little bit better, there'd be such a movement in the revenue and profitability results, because it's otherwise those folks are dead weight. So I would say it's bigger teams understanding the the contribution of each by player instead of by team, because that's skilling everybody up, the people who are in the right seats, right? And then secondly, keeping them, because of course 2021 is such a challenging employment market. So surrounding people with love and keeping them there, desperately important.
Yeah, no, I cannot believe what's going on with the labor shortage right now. And it's strange because the people are out there, they just don't want the same jobs anymore, or they don't want to go back into the office or into that stale work environment. They've had it, good, so to speak, where they've had some freedom, and it's amazing. It's kind of, you have to be, you as a company, as hiring managers, you have to adapt and be able to attract talent, I think, in more ways than people have ever had to consider it before. And you're starting to see these bigger companies now have the permanent work from wherever you want policies that are coming out, and trying to get ahead of the trend and make it in their core to their culture. And I think you have to do those types of things to an extent now to maybe you can keep your talent that you have today, but it's not going to get you the next generation of sales hires or whoever if you're competing against companies that they're catering to lifestyle now. They're not just catering to career. It's getting personal.
Well, and now you're talking about even cross-generational leadership and management, because it varies by not just how people like to work, but what they're used to and where they're most productive.
Yeah, well, it's great. So this has been awesome. I got a lot
fun to talk to you.
I got a lot of really great takeaways. I'm excited to share this and get it together for us. How should people get in touch with Tracy Bullock? What's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, it's tracybullock.com, or excuse me, Tracy Bullock at Sandler.com. There's no E in Tracy, so it's just Tracy Bullock, like Sandra, but not the same family. So Tracy.Bullock at Sandler, SANDLER.com. You can reach me there. You can reach me through LinkedIn, Tracy Bullock 1. And anybody has any questions, want to be connected with people who are local in their market, happy to make that happen.
Well, thank you so much again, Tracy. I'll be talking with you soon. Thanks for the time, the insights, and I appreciate it. Good catching up.
Thank you. Talk to you later, Patrick. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye.